Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a supercharged partisan broadcast from a YouTube and Rumble channel called Matt Morse TV. Now, our goal here isn't to pick a political side, but rather to objectively analyze exactly how political media frames current events right before an election. It's really a fascinating, real-time look at how a commentator takes the news, interprets government actions, and weaves the whole shebang together to energize a specific voter base. So let's jump right in and deconstruct the playbook. To make sense of the host's fast-paced broadcast, we've broken things down into four main themes: the 2026 premise, allegations of systemic fraud, high-profile DOJ indictments, and finally, midterm election strategy. Let's get to it. Starting off with Section 1, the 2026 premise, setting the stage. Right out of the gate, the host opens with just undeniable energy. He frames the episode as a massive celebration of immediate government action, literally claiming the DOJ has gone into what he calls hyperdrive, overdrive, ludicrous speed. I mean, he's actively setting this triumphant stage for his audience, right? He repeatedly calls it one of the most positive, good news shows he's ever done, really signaling that the momentum has completely shifted in their favor. And to put all this excitement into perspective, you have to look at the timeline. According to the broadcast, we're sitting in May 2026. That's 14 months into the administration's second term, and crucially, exactly 6 months before the midterm elections. On top of that, he notes that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche stepped in just 26 days prior. So for the host, these rapid-fire government actions happening right now are a direct result of Blanche's new leadership and represent a massive turning point ahead of those midterms. Moving on to Section 2, allegations of systemic fraud, the data. The broadcast heavily leans on this specific number, 22. That's the number of search warrants executed in a single morning by federal agents in Minnesota. The host points out that these warrants targeted largely Somali-linked businesses, and he specifically calls out a daycare network called the Quality Learning Center. He uses this sweeping federal action as his prime example to show that the government is aggressively cracking down on what he frames as deep-seated systemic abuse. But the story doesn't just stop at the raids, it instantly turns into a political football. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz put out a statement saying state agencies actually helped to catch this irregular behavior in a joint effort. But then, in stark contrast, FBI Director Kash Patel aggressively rebukes Walz, stating the federal agencies executed the warrants completely on their own. The host absolutely seizes on this clash to paint the state's Democratic governor as frantically and falsely trying to steal credit for federal actions. Then, the host drops another massive data point. Citing Trump administration Secretary Brooke Rollins, he makes this staggering claim. 4.3 million Americans were removed from SNAP, food stamp benefits, in just the first 14 months of the term. Now, to back up his argument that the welfare system is fundamentally broken, the host isolates some highly specific statistics from Secretary Rollins, pointing to an estimated $10 billion in annual savings. But look at the specific examples he chooses to highlight here. He points out that they found over 2,000 Tesla owners and 144 Porsche owners receiving food stamps, and that's just based on a single state's data. By zeroing in on luxury cars, the host expertly stokes outrage, building this compelling narrative for his audience that taxpayer money is being egregiously abused. It's a very strategic choice of facts. Okay, let's jump into Section 3, high-profile DOJ indictments, the legal crackdown. Here, the host heaps immense credit onto Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche for his first 26 days in office. He takes all these separate legal moves like indicting the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Minnesota daycare raids, plus indicting a former Fauci advisor and a former FBI director, and packages them all together. By doing this, the host is arguing that a massive, long-awaited, deep state purge is actively unfolding right before his viewers' eyes. Let's look a bit closer at one of those major indictments, former FBI Director James Comey. Now, according to the host's interpretation, the main justification for this indictment hinges on decoding a social media post as a literal threat. Comey apparently posted a picture of seashells arranged to spell out the number 8647. Well, the host explains that 86 is restaurant slang for get rid of, and 47 refers to the 47th president. So, for the host, this is no cryptic post. He sees it as unquestionable justification for federal criminal charges and an arrest warrant. Moving on to the indictment of David Morens, a former advisor to Dr. Anthony Fauci, the host outlines some very specific steps to claim that the origins of COVID-19 were intentionally covered up. He details allegations like deleting emails to dodge Freedom of Information Act requests, using private Gmail accounts, and even receiving high-end wine and meals in exchange for pushing a natural origin narrative in medical journals. To the host, this isn't just a legal indictment. It's total vindication for his audience, who, he claims, knew the truth all along. Finally, we arrive at Section 4, Midterm Election Strategy, Connecting the Dots. The host proudly points to recent Harvard/Harris polling data showing a dead heat, 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. Now, you might be wondering, why is a tie presented as such incredible news? Well, the host explains the historical context. He argues that national polls typically overrepresent Democrats, and the Democrats historically need a 5-point advantage in generic polling just to swing the House. So, in his eyes, a 50-50 dead heat 6 months out signals an absolute conservative surge. He bolsters this optimism even further by mapping out a path to a Republican majority of 211 seats. But he actually notes that these projections hinge on some very specific legal battles at the state level, namely a newly redrawn Republican map in Florida getting approved and a newly drawn Democratic map in Virginia being actively blocked by the state Supreme Court. He uses these specific legal victories to prove that the electoral math is heavily tilting in their favor. But the host isn't just stopping at celebrating polling numbers. He is actively advocating for legislative action to lock in this projected victory. He vehemently pushes for what he calls the Save America Act, outlining some really strict requirements: mandatory voter ID, proof of citizenship, and a near-absolute ban on mail-in ballots with only very narrow exceptions. He frames passing this, or even just achieving it via executive order, as an absolute life-or-death necessity for election integrity. And this brings us to what is perhaps the most revealing moment of the entire source text. In a moment of just remarkable transparency, the host explicitly links the timing of those DOJ indictments and FBI raids directly to maximum midterm election impact. He literally says, save big stuff like this, start dropping these bombshells during midterm season where it will have maximum political impact. I mean, he's not hiding the ball here. He openly acknowledges that saving these events for the midterm season is a deliberate political strategy designed to dominate the news cycle and influence voters. As we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with this vital question to think about. How does partisan media utilize the timing of legal and federal events to influence the narratives of election cycles? By deconstructing this broadcast, we've seen firsthand how specific data points, legal indictments, and intense emotional rhetoric are all meticulously woven together to create a cohesive, mobilizing narrative just months before an election. So the next time you consume highly charged, politically timed media from absolutely any side of the aisle, take a moment to consider how the timing of the events being reported is being used to shape the story. Thanks so much for joining us, and keep questioning the narrative.